Whether it's David and Goliath, Rocky, or Rudy, everyone loves a good underdog story. The story of Teyon, a AA game development studio from Poland, is just that. Now, it's understandable if you don't recognize the name, but you may have heard about their biggest mainstream hit in Robocop Rogue City, which is praised for its authenticity and its love of the source material. The game did so well that Teyon even saw fit to release a nice-sized expansion called Unfinished Business in summer 2025, putting a bow on their breakout hit. But all this warm reception was a long time coming. The studio had nearly lost its reputation as soon as it hit the mainstream with 2014's Rambo the video game, which holds a miserable score on Metacritic and has been called the worst game of 2014 and one of the worst games ever made. While real fans appreciated their next game in 2019's Terminator Resistance, a punitive drubbing from the press made sure it never made the waves it should have, and it all seemed influenced by Rambo's earlier performance. So how did Teyon go from the butt of the joke to a fan favorite? Well, that's the question I aim to answer today. There's very little behind-the-scenes info to be found on the internet, so our focus will shift to the proof in the pudding, inductively assessing quality from the games themselves instead of analyzing all the background developer intent. And for a variety of reasons we'll uncover as we go, it's clear that Teyon not only learned from their mistakes like few other studios do except maybe Spiders, but they excel where others have failed in the licensed game market and have made what are arguably the best Terminator and Robocop games ever made, proving not only their doubters wrong, but being an inspiration to new game developers and gamers alike that no story is defined by one bad chapter. Our story spans almost a decade, from 2014's Rambo to 2019's Terminator Resistance to 2023's Robocop Rogue City. This is the rise of Teyon. Teyon was founded in 2006 in Krakow, Poland. Mostly the team did unglamorous contract work like localization and QA for other game companies, and making small games for the PC and DS and Wii like 101 Pony Pets and Hubert the Teddy Bear Winter Games. Like a lot of these little games. Holy crap. Now, there's no shame in that game. I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do to keep the lights on and put food on the table, but everyone wants to hit the big time eventually, right? Well, all that would soon change, and not for the better. Enter Reef Entertainment, a mid-level UK publisher who had just acquired the rights to the Rambo franchise, what with the nice box office of the 2008 movie and the fact that The Expendables 2 was coming out soon. Now, it's unclear exactly how Reef chose Teyon as the developer, but it seems likely that they responded to the arcade gameplay of Teyon's recent Heavy Fire series that they thought would be well suited to adapting the first 3 Rambo movies. Reef Entertainment was really hyped up for this project, and they were sure that this was their ticket to the big leagues. Kevin Hemmingson of Movie Mavericks interviewed Reef's commercial director Craig Lewis, and he said that
the power of the brand was clear when we gave our first press release on this title. It simply went mad. Since new investment has been placed in Reef, we have been keen to grow both the company and also the size of the projects we are doing, and Rambo will clearly put us on the map.
Alright, listen, as someone who chases internet fame every time I upload a video onto this here YouTube site, I get the dream. But the final product proves that corners were definitely cut, likely influenced by inexperience and budget and a little bit of that good old lust for fame. So the result, while not as monstrous as most people say, is one of the most frustrating experiences I've ever had playing a game, so let's talk about why. So the game frames its narrative through an old Vietnam POW giving Rambo's eulogy and recounting his life accomplishments, and so we relive the first 3 movies across 3 chapters. It's a simple story hook, but it's about the only thing that's working in the presentation. Rambo the video game is not a looker. Despite coming out in 2014 after the PS4 and Xbox One had released, the game's small budget and number of production problems either kept it on the last gen and the Xbox 360, PS3, and PC, or made sure it never left, one or the other. As such, we get a game that has some nice looking vistas if you crank up the resolution on PC like I did, but I can't imagine how crappy this game looked on the Xbox 360 and the PS3 with its PS2 era character models like Rambo's face, which is hardly recognizable. You wonder if Reef Entertainment actually had to even pay to use Sylvester Stallone's likeness at all. The Rambo 2 chapter cracks me up too because Rambo's hair is way bigger in the first chapter than it was in the first movie, and then the game follows suit when adapting the second movie by making his hair even bigger. He's wearing a fucking beanbag on his head before long, and my goodness did they phone in hot Asian woman when adapting Ko Bao from Rambo 2. She looks like the average My Chemical Romance enjoyer, and despite making no attempt to get any of her facial features similar, at least they didn't skimp on the pokies when her shirt gets wet. Stay classy, guys.
We need to go! We cannot stay here!
But as evidenced by the atrocious voice acting of the Heavy Fire games, Teyon didn't have the highest production values of all time, so it makes some sense why they chose a very conservative approach to making Rambo sound authentic. Hiring a busy Sylvester Stallone and trying to replicate the late Richard Crenna's iconic performance as Troutman might be tall orders, so they just straight up asked rights holder Studio Canal for their dialogue and sound effects library from the movies. This meant that while the guns, explosions, and music all sound pretty great, the dialogue is just random clips inserted as the scene dictates that are often imbalanced with the rest of the voice actors and the other sounds, and they don't really sound right for the environment that they're in.
Come on! There's men down there! Our men! You mean your men! Now sit down, sir!
Even the that Rambo does after completing a level sounds like it was recorded with someone's phone from the next room over. Looping Teasel's citywide message to evacuate the streets over and over as you try and pursue him through the city is just peak laziness too, and just about drove me crazy. Now the presentation's not as bad as I'd heard, but it still often feels like a cheap soundboard prank call from the 2000s.
Good morning, Horseshoe, Southern Indiana. This is everything. We got your call.
Who is it this time?
I beg your pardon?
But as cheap as this feels, I feel like these faults could have been overlooked if we just put a bag over the production values and the gameplay picked up the slack, but it's a really mixed bag. You start out each level with a specific primary weapon and equipment like bows and grenades, but you get to choose your own secondary weapon, which can be anything from a lowly pistol all the way up to heavy machine guns. Though I played the entire game and only unlocked the AK-47. Even this loadout screen is a harbinger of how on rails the whole experience is. So once you're loaded into one of the many levels meant to recreate or riff on classic encounters from the movie, you'll move along an invisible track, blasting enemies as they fall into the screen, and then they'll take their places out into the open or behind cover in varying distances, much like any light gun arcade game you've ever played. Once you've killed all the enemies in a scene, you'll be moved on to the next by the game, your only agency being to take cover as available. Also, much like the cover system, there's a Gears of War-esque reloading mechanic where hitting the sweet spot on the timing window gives you double ammo in your next magazine, but it can also give you half ammo if you miss the window and jam the magazine. Supplementing these two mechanics is the Wrath meter, which charges up pips that, once full, can be activated for a limited time, which slows down time where you stop using ammo and each kill will heal you. Getting the hang of reloading as you're moving in between scenes or while in cover while also making sure to keep yourself alive for the hardest scenes with your Wrath meter is a fun little dance that rewards strategic experimentation. And boy will you need it, because this is one of the most brutally difficult and clunky games you will ever play.
It's over!
Now I can see the vision here, make Rambo go shooty shooty bang bang like a lot, let him fire his explosive arrows at people and stab them in the neck, and we should have a game on our hands, right? Well, that's the power fantasy, but the only fantasy that I had was playing actually anything else but this. So let's just start from the top. What's immediately odd is how, unlike classic light gun games which only show the reticle on screen, Rambo adds the gun model on screen like a classic FPS. In theory, you'd think this would be the best of both genres, but because the reticle is at such a length and angle away from the end of the gun barrel, it's actually misleading where the reticle will end up on screen, so I had to just ignore the gun model entirely or I'd never hit anything. And even if you ignore the gun model as you should, every gun is an automatic with huge spread, so you're having to just unload to keep up with the enemy DPS and pray you'll eventually hit them in the head, otherwise you're not going to make it through most scenes. If I hadn't thought to turn the default aiming sensitivity of 50 up to the maximum of 100, I'd have never gotten through this game. Even then, some sections like the stealth section here, the bow never fires fast enough or aims fast enough for you to not get seen, so I had to choose a different route through the level, the action variety. And as if controlling the game weren't fuckery enough, enemy configurations can be just vile. Like the third chapter with grenadiers only exposing themselves to be shot for a brief second or so, but because their comrades are shooting you so much, you'll never really have the right moment to pop up and scan for them or you'll just die. So you hunker down in cover and hope to not have the grenadier kill you in almost always one hit within a half second of throwing the grenade. You can shoot these grenades before they get to you if you're fast enough, and it becomes about the only way to defeat the second to last checkpoint, but this is a diabolical dance. You'll try to balance this out by leveraging the slow-mo that happens after blowing something up with your grenade or rocket launcher, or while using your Wrath, but with Wrath especially, your slow-mo is only so good, and some enemy configurations are so incredibly overpowering you really can't heal as fast as you should to keep up with the amount of DPS they're handing out. Worst of all, you can't bank any Wrath energy. As soon as you activate it, it uses up a whole pip, even if you switched it on to shoot just one guy and barely use any energy before switching it off again. It's balanced in such a player-unfriendly way. And I haven't even talked about God's greatest gift to games, the QuickTime events. No one ever really loved these, let's be honest, but they're really bad here because the timing is so unintuitive and because so much of the game requires trial and error and countless retries already. The QuickTime events are no different, and they often come in chains, so you'll be sick and tired of these sequences before long. And honestly, that's really the reason this game was a nightmare slog to get through. The effects are fine, the explosions are cool, the vehicle sections are actually rather empowering with their reckless carnage, but my gosh, the floppy gunplay, the cheap enemy placements, and the sheer, relentlessly unfair difficulty of it all just had me losing my religion. This is a game everyone says is about 3 hours, but it took me like 8 hours on the easiest difficulty. This is one of the hardest games I've ever played, up there with X2 Wolverine's Revenge and Max Payne 3 on hard, or I don't know, Ninja Gaiden that I'm also playing right now. And this was the easiest it could have been. The game has a progression meter where you level up using points you scored on each level to unlock perks like auto-passing QuickTime events or extra life gained while using Wrath, in addition to passive boost to damage output or ammo capacity. These are well and good, and the game's persistent progression across all difficulties seems to encourage the game to be played over and over to unlock the full scope of what Teyon's offering here. And maybe that's the secret sauce for how you beat the game on any other difficulty, and that was always intended. But Rambo is so fucking grindy even on a first run that I cannot imagine a couple stat boosts to make you able to compete on these higher difficulties. Nor would you want to on a quality level, because you just have to replay this mediocre ass game. If it wasn't for the fact that I wanted to know deep in my bones why this game was received so badly for the purposes of making this video the best way I could, I never would have persisted. Let's just say I rage uninstalled this one like 5 times before finally getting to the end. Now, as frustrating as all this is, fans and critics have often blamed Teyon wholesale for using such an outdated and seemingly lazy genre such as the arcade-style on-rails light gun shooter approach, and, only adding the much maligned QuickTime events to make it even worse. But Reef didn't hire Teyon on a whim, and Matt McMuscles confirmed from a source inside of Reef that Rambo was always going to be an on-rails arcade shooter.
I was able to confirm privately with a source close to the project that despite the coy answer to the aforementioned question, the game was always planned to be on rails.
Teyon had already solidified almost every mechanic employed in Rambo the video game in their heavy fire games, from the cover mechanics to blowing up red barrels, all that good stuff. Teyon was just putting a Rambo skin over what they'd already been making for years. Now, we can hate the balancing and the other choices all day, but this feels like a compromise on Reef's part to not pick a different developer who could handle a more robust FPS experience that, would have sold better. But clearly they were fine with it. They signed off on it, and to be honest, this was all Teyon really knew how to do at the time. Matt McMuscles also confirmed that management and marketing problems plagued the game, as if that weren't obvious enough. So it's clear that Reef and Teyon were both in over their heads a little bit. Reef thought they could buy their way into the big time if they got a big enough license, and Teyon simply wasn't ready for this kind of project yet.
Covey Leader, this is Raven. Covey Leader, this is Raven. Do you copy?
Surprisingly, though, the horrendous reputation of Rambo the video game didn't prevent the team from making some DLC after all for the happy few that did enjoy the game. Which brings us to the Baker Team DLC levels released 2 years later in 2016, entirely for free, mind you, which is a nice showing of good faith.
This is huge. Do you already feel like a rock star, Danforth?
Yeah, almost. Just need to get my boots shining again.
Now, because the main game had been criticized for doing nothing but repeating the beats of the movies with little creativity, Reef Entertainment thought it would be a good idea to do an original prequel story focusing on Rambo's Vietnam team before they were captured and tortured. Weirdly enough, the writing's not great, but the voiceover is totally reasonable this time, even featuring the late Bill Roberts as the squad leader, who's known for voicing Vesemir from The Witcher 3, among other things. The squad's banter's pretty dumb, but it's harmless, and a nice injection of personality into a game that's basically just Troutman saying, "Rambo, we need you," and Rambo going, "Okay, bro," over and over. But more importantly, at least the jungle environments look better than the main game, although Rambo kind of looks like Jose Rambo. The combat's generally less punishing, though you will want to play this DLC last, not first, as they're nearly impossible until you've upgraded your Rambo some from the main game. Now, I guess free 99 is a good deal, but there's not a whole lot of content here, so you've got a very brief injection of dumb writing and shootouts to put a bow on this gift-wrapped turd of a project.
Ignore the pain!
Now, I can excuse bad presentation or clunk all day if there's some heart on display. But the problem with Rambo the video game overall is that it's been executed with all the rushed, money-hungry greed that most AAA projects have these days, except without the basic functionality that those often boring games at least have. The love of money is the root of all evil or something like that.
They drew first blood, not me.
And since Teyon and Reef had drawn first blood, they were asking for the fallout that ensued. But like every good comeback story, like the Indiana Pacers coming back 5 times from being down 15 points in the 2025 playoffs, or the prodigal son returning home, this disastrous game would give Reef and Teyon something to learn from.
Somehow I don't believe him.
There was a chrome lining, as Reef had already secured another license in the Terminator franchise. So if there's no fate but what we make ourselves, did Teyon eventually survive Judgment Day? Well, let's flash forward 5 years into the future and find out in Chapter 2 of The Rise of Teyon.
Come with me if you want to live.
John Rambo. And it's good that he's dead.
It's impressive enough that Teyon and their publisher Reef managed to survive the fallout of Rambo the video game, and experienced critics and fans alike called the worst game of 2014 and one of the worst ever made. But Reef and Teyon didn't just shrink back into the mid-level AA shadows to lick their wounds. They got right back out there like Barney Stinson on the prowl, looking to score. Reef's backup plan was the Terminator license that they had in their back pocket even before Rambo was released, and they still believed in the little Polish developer that could in Teyon. Yet again, all parties are pretty fired up about making a game about another 80s masterpiece. Just booting up the game alone told me something had changed.
Here at Reef, we are huge fans of 1984 and 1991 sci-fi action masterpieces, said a Reef spokesperson. It's an incredible opportunity and an equally huge responsibility to create a game that does great justice to the motion pictures. We are studying all aspects and influences of the Terminator universe defined in Terminator and Terminator 2 Judgment Day. We have started on our journey and are drawing on all the diverse materials available to produce a high-quality, authentic, and exciting Terminator video game.
The menu theme by Chris Detina uses Brad Feidel's classic Terminator theme, but dresses it up and transforms it so much with fuller instrumentation and a slightly different pacing that even YouTube copyright claim bots didn't recognize it, so that should tell you something. It's also almost the exact same version as the demo that Detina brought to his interview, which scored him the job in the first place. Now, he's a huge Terminator fan who watches the second movie when he's sick, and he says that Teyon is just as big a fan as he is. Judging by how highly Detina spoke of the dev process with Teyon, having no crunch and being very smooth and full of great communication and professionalism, you can tell that something had changed in the air about how this game wasn't going to be a repeat of Rambo's failure. Now, we might be resisting Terminators in this game, but making the game itself was a resistant effort of its own. A mutiny against not giving your all and giving yourself every chance to succeed. Teyon eschewed the copy-paste approach of Rambo and wrote an original prequel arc that essentially ignores the movie lore post-Terminator 2. We play as Jacob Rivers, the last surviving soldier of the Pacific Division who just ran into the very first ever seen T-800 masquerading as a human who wiped out the entire squad. Rivers makes contact with the hard-as-nails but still supermodel-ready Resistance Commander Baron, who's taking the fight right at Skynet, when she's not falling for us, that is. Rivers also brings along a small pack of survivors to help join the Resistance, or leave the Resistance, depending on your choices. The scavenger Jennifer, who's got her eye on us, she's also our conscience, her little adopted brother, the matriarch Aaron, and the wise old man Ryan. These characters act as our links to the old world, and we can change the ending based on how we take care of our friends by fulfilling their side quest and speaking empathetically to them. But in addition to the lure of meeting John Connor and the Resistance later on, we also have the mysterious character of the Stranger, who seems to know more than he's letting on, and keeps saving our bacon but keeping his motives hidden. How it all plays out will please Terminator fans immensely, as it shows the Resistance's first encounters with the strategic escalation that Skynet is using to infiltrate humanity, all culminating in an epic final sequence deep into the heart of their facilities. Resistance acts much like Robocop Rogue City does for that franchise, where it remixes a lot of the things that we've already seen in the other movies in a technically additive lore way, like this technically new material that's never happened before. Now, this isn't essential lore, but it is a nice window into what it might feel like to see a lot of these things coming into being for the first time, like the time travel, the Terminators masquerading as humans, and all that good stuff. But it's also doubling as a way for us to experience all the stuff that we'd want to experience were we adapting those other movies straight up. And it does all of this with a fair bit more heart and nuance than you might expect. Teyon leans into a perhaps obvious inspiration for its approach to its world building, and that is the Bethesda Fallout games. You engage in dialogue trees and hub areas in between missions, and your choices will have small ripples in how the story plays out, but it's really more concerned with immediate endearment to whomever you're talking to. So it's very light RPG elements. You can essentially be a dick unnecessarily, or just tell people what they want to hear to get their friendship rating up.
This one time, when I was little, he wanted to make a huge sign that said, "Welcome," on the side of our house in Pasadena. So he said, "I bet you can't spell that." And of course I had to prove him wrong. Believe me, now I know how stupid that was.
Not at all. That was very clever.
Yeah.
And you can even romance Baron and Jennifer if you want, even both of them, which seems like a bit of an oversight. Point being, it's not really meant to be deep, but it's not nothing. It's just enough to feel like flavor, and what would otherwise just be a cutscene now becomes a light choice tree, and I can appreciate the conciseness of this. In fact, the writing is remarkably concise overall. Modern games have deemed it necessary to add reams of boring context to what are really just fetch quests. You know, like the recent action RPG Assassin's Creeds. So what I really like is that Teyon respects the player's time and is a lot more economical, getting their motivations and feelings out there in detail, but without monologuing. And I appreciated the hell out of this. It keeps things brisk without sacrificing the humanity that the game is all too good at reminding us matters as we struggle against inhumanity. Now, I don't want to oversell the writing as master class or anything, but not everything has to be incredible to be good. And one important part of the way that this game is written is that it escalates and complicates in ways that are exciting to engage. It makes its set pieces hit in ways they wouldn't have if we didn't have this emotional core informing the action, and so on. Most importantly, it shows that Teyon did listen to the criticism that Rambo added nothing to the lore, and decided to actualize their own passion for the Terminator franchise by making it even better and fully engaging and calling on its best aspects to make a compelling game journey of their own. Another way that Teyon respects the player's time and rewards them for investment is in the gameplay design, which seems to have always just enough space in its post-apocalyptic world to explore and wonder and kind of take in the scenery, but also plenty of engagement points to keep you invested and always chasing more resources, that next upgrade. At first, I even thought it was weird that Resistance was using Fallout imagery at all, and then I rewatched the first two Terminators and realized that if anything, Bethesda's Fallout was the one cribbing imagery pretty hard from how Terminator's future looked. Regardless of the influence, if there is any, the world does work beautifully, and the player is gifted linear but layered spaces to flank enemies and draw them into traps with conveniently placed plasma barrels just waiting to be blown up for big damage, and there are plenty of hidey holes and MSIM-like vents to sneak through or just explore for more crafting resources. Ah yes, crafting. You'll be doing a fair bit of it, and it draws easy comparisons to the Far Cry games, though you're never really upgrading your capacity so much as you are making excess pipe bombs, sound distractions, medkits, and lockpicks. Lots of lockpicks. There are so many things to unlock in this game, and it's all done exactly as Bethesda's recent RPGs have done it. And if you can't unlock a door because your skill's not high enough, the game will put a marker so you can come back and try your luck again once you've leveled up. Also in keeping with the steal from the best mentality that Teyon has, while not performing the main missions, you can take out Skynet outposts that you come across for big XP gains. These play out a lot like Far Cry's outposts, except here you're dodging or engaging Terminators and sentry guns to either blow up all the plasma barrels to take out the base, or you can sneak in there and hack the computer to take it all out without expending any ammo. There's a fun tug-of-war where the best laid plans can go pear-shaped in an instant and induce frantic improvisation to stay alive and finish your mission. And that tension between gunplay and stealth is the heart of Terminator Resistance. The first time we get caught in the hospital where the Terminators arrive and we can't damage them at all with our human weapons, it's terrifying. Death in a score pounds with our heartbeat as we scramble to stay out of sight and escape. It's thrilling stuff, but like those old weapons, they're too soon traded out for shootouts with T-800s like the regular fodder once we get our hands on a litany of awesome laser rifles, heavy machine guns, recharging blasters, and rocket launchers. Now, they'll still fuck you up pretty easily, even the little spiders that zap you. No enemy is a pushover, and some areas like the hotel overridden by Terminators Terminators are super frustrating because of how fast you get seen and gunned down, but in many other cases, it's kind of immersion breaking to hear that a Terminator wearing human skin once infiltrated your ranks and killed an entire division single-handedly, and then you and 3 other guys kill about 30 of them in the in-game battles with no problem. It's not a huge deal, and obviously this would make the game a very different, probably less fun game to be totally consistent, but it is a little distracting lore-wise. And if the gunplay wasn't decent enough, if not occasionally hampered by auto-aim that you can't turn off, you've got plenty of light RPG depth to play with. For every enemy killed, lock-picked, or objective completed, you get XP. Once you level up, you get skill points to use on your various skill trees, which range from basic passive buffs like extra weapons damage or ability to use better weapons, or the ability to take less damage or craft better gear or hack tougher computers. I like Far Cry-esque upgrade trees, but there's not much creativity here, or game-changing effects like Far Cry's abilities often are. This is mostly just a game of banking your points to upgrade your guy as needed to pass any skill checks that you come across, like if you wanted to be able to disarm and pocket the trapwire bombs that you come across, or get through a door you otherwise wouldn't have been able to. It doesn't pretend to be very deep, and it's a nice bit of texture on what is otherwise an average first-person shooter, albeit one with great particle effects. Now, this game also has some DLC packaged into a complete edition, then that was remastered for the PS5 and Xbox Series X, and the upgrades to its visual fidelity are stunning. The character models and animations are still pretty stiff and decidedly AA, but the colors, explosions, and sound and particle effects are stunningly realized and make battles a real treat, especially towards the end. It's also nice to hear some decent voice acting to supplement the aforementioned decent writing. There are even some cool Easter eggs like seeing the human model that the T-1000 Terminator 2 is based on lying there in the hospital. I also found it hilarious that you can bang both your commander and your homie Jennifer in identically awful sex scenes, as if no one's paying attention because the end times are here.
Dismissed.
The way the commander just tosses you aside and says, "You're dismissed," is so funny, especially since she's only doing it to convince you to go kill some underling for her in return. What's kind of crazy is how low this game's Metacritic score is, and you'll see plenty of hater Reddit posts like, "I was told this game was awesome, but turns out it sucks." Now, the game has a vocal fan base, no doubt, but I'm embarrassed for the people who thought they were too good for this game. The games press has always picked on games that it can't ride the coattails of, and so many games that are 7 out of 10 have been treated like 4 out of 10s, which is incidentally what IGN gave this game. It's also the score they gave Alien Isolation, so their track record is dubious at best. But it's the epitome of entitled punch-down corporatism to pretend that this game isn't full of authenticity, love for the source material, and honestly, just a good time. I've even heard it criticized as feeling too generic, as if it's just a sci-fi shooter that could be about any robot franchise and not necessarily Terminator. Now, to an extent, perhaps they're right, as it works as a lean Fallout, Stalker, or Metro in many ways, but that just means it holds up as a reasonable shooter if it didn't have a license attached to it, which it very much does. It's not the greatest game ever made or anything, but it is solid across the board, and considering how poorly received and how unbalanced Rambo the video game is, it's amazing how much better Teyon's second license outing is. It's exciting, well-paced, and just a fun video game of light exploration, lots of loot and lot picking and hacking, with some pretty decent gunfights. Tell me you're not having to cross your legs as the Terminator theme plays while you triumphantly smash through huge HK-47s and aerials with rocket launchers as the humans prevail, John Connor himself buzzing in your ear with commands. It's just great stuff. I found myself playing for 2 to 3 hours at a time, sometimes even into the early morning, which is not something that I really do anymore for almost any game, no matter how good. Some have said Terminator Resistance feels like an Xbox 360 game of the 2010s, and you know what? Good. I'm glad something feels like it came out from a time when games were still more concerned with genuine escapism than with a bottom line or a list of corporate metrics to meet. I can't think of a higher compliment for Resistance than how easily I lost track of time while playing. It just felt like the good old days. Now, the only problems I really had of note were that there's no real big boss or anything at the end of the game, just some decent Fallout-style slideshow ending cutscenes, and the game crashed 3 times on me in my first playthrough, though it never did so on my second playthrough, so maybe that got patched. Overall, I'm hard-pressed not to recommend this lean and charming AA gem to you. It's reverential to the lore and the feel of the movies with some incredibly faithful vistas, some great lighting and effects, gameplay that engages with persistent upgrades, and a decent story with some decent voice acting, an exciting set of end battles, and some great Easter eggs for Terminator fans. Resistance is sorely underrated, and may go down as the best Terminator game ever made. Most importantly, it's Teyon's redemption story, proving that when they commit themselves to a project with more than passion for the source material and actually commit to a good game, they can do it. You wouldn't think it possible, but it's unmistakably the case here. In proof that Teyon's resurgence wasn't just a fluke, they offered up 2 pretty good DLCs. And the Annihilation line campaign, we get to work for Kyle Reese, and even get to flesh out and see Pharaoh, the woman who dies in the first scene in Terminator. There's some really annoying steelfish minefields, and the DLCs in general is a bit overtuned in terms of difficulty, but there's good voice acting here, decently unique mission objectives, and more workable stealth encounters which make this feel better than the main game did. I also love the really scary music in the cemetery, as well as some incredible atmosphere in the last level with bright diffused light, rubble everywhere, and fiery explosions. The last boss sucks, but at least there is one here, unlike the main game. All told, this is an even tighter, more exciting, and more impactful feeling chapter in Terminator lore, and is even better than the main game. So mad props to Teyon for upping their game even further. And though they didn't need to, Teyon also served up the Infiltrator DLC, which is essentially a roguelite mode across one big contiguous map, where you go around as a Terminator and clear human patrols, pick up intel, salvage Skynet tech, and try to find out info to reveal a tech commander to kill and end the mission. It's pretty fun to run around with Terminator Red all over the screen and wreck guys. Feels a lot more like the movies do. It's also clearly a prototyping of what Teyon's next project would be on Robocop Rogue City, as Robo could also pick guys up and throw them or just walk through outmatched bad guys like they're made of cottage cheese, scanning the environment as he goes. So with the full game of proof that Teyon was back in business and 2 DLCs that not only had a better ending than the main game but set in motion what would become Robocop, I think we can safely say that the Rambo curse had been broken. They'd proved they could make a game with modern day gameplay and add to a franchise's lore with an interesting perspective of what it felt like to see Skynet learn how to infiltrate human ranks with cyborgs and how to time travel. But would this hot streak continue, or would it just be a one-off? Well, let's say goodbye to the War of the Machines and take ourselves down to old Detroit to protect the innocent and uphold the law. In Chapter 3, Teyon Goes Rogue City. You know, as good as Terminator Resistance is, I'm not fully convinced it ever really fully came out of the shadow of the disastrous launch of Rambo the video game. Despite showing that Teyon had learned from their mistakes and proven themselves capable game designers, many fans and critics alike weren't willing to give them much credit. It wasn't until Robocop Rogue City came out in 2023 that the needle started to move Teyon's direction in a big way. But let's not get it twisted, that transformation was slow going. The initial Robocop trailers had a mixed reaction, some people ecstatic that the game looked so authentic to yet another classic 80s action hero, and others lamenting that it's clearly AA production values. Yet again, fidelity hordes who'd rather play something in 12K that sucked instead of playing something awesome that looks a little dated, go figure.
I'd buy that for $1.
But it's their loss, because while Terminator Resistance was a pretty damn good AA deal, Robocop Rogue City is simply fantastic. Teyon really went for broke on adapting this world.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
The story is set in between Robocop 2 and 3, but it's also, like Terminator Resistance, a bit of a remix that technically is an original story adding to the lore, but it is really there as a great big excuse to let us relive a lot of the fun stuff that we've already seen on screen in the movies. From the very first shot, it's like being rocketed back into the silver screen with that newscast dum 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 dum. Like the beginning of Robocop 2, the city's shown to be overrun with street crime and the drug nuke, and the convergence of those two particular vices are the Torchhead gang who are vying for big power in old Detroit, interrupting said news broadcast to tell everyone they mean business. Sounds like a bad day to be a good guy, huh? Well, tell that to Robocop, whose aura absolutely envelops the beautifully rendered streets of old Detroit as he trudges slowly to the crime scene. I mean, God bless America. Who even remembers Afro Rambo when you're looking at all the lighting and reflections and effects here? Now sure, the character models are a bit dated, but the texturing and the level of detail in the street trash and graffiti is excellent here and gets even better throughout the game. But what's most fun about this opening is how economical it is while still indulging in the fun stuff. Robo is joined by his faithful friend Ann Lewis, and we go on a gang-busting spree up this news building to save the folks up top, dismembering torch heads and redecorating the floors in their viscera. Robocop's got his trusty unlimited ammo burst-fire pistol and can highlight any enemies in range whenever he sights in. And if you're feeling frisky, you can grab any gun your enemy drops as your secondary, or grab and throw any enemy within range, as well as pick up and throw any loose environmental objects like TVs or dumpsters. There's so much freedom to inhabit Robocop here, and so much delicious power fantasy bossy feedback as you mow through these guys. No amount of praise seems quite adequate for how good all the dismemberment, blood, explosions, and music all feels together. The easiness of combat with the highlighting of enemies and the lack of dodging, jumping, crouching, or snap to cover also feels like a bit of a nod to the rail shooter legacy of the heavy fire and Rambo games that Teyon had made, only this time a lot more feature-rich and visceral. And as the game goes on, the game just keeps getting better and better, evolving in an action RPG format reminiscent of Resistance, and how you earn XP by doing main quest and side quests, and for doing small repeatable tasks like picking up pieces of evidence or disarming bombs.
Nothing I'd rather do.
But what's different and much better here is how Robo's skills trees aren't just incremental stat upgrades. You'll eventually unlock more and more powerful versions of a dash, a shockwave that can kill up to 3 or 4 guys at once, a shield, and the best ability in the game, and one which I couldn't beat the last boss without, the good old bullet time. Now, none of these abilities really exist in the Robocop mythos, but they feel like they should, and they're mostly just approximations of the durability and senses that Robocop uses in the films, so it's not some big lore faux pas to me. More importantly, it's fun. There's also some subtle RPG depth on display here. How you progress certain side missions will depend on what skills you've unlocked. You may want to put points into engineering so you can unlock the safes for loot, or sometimes you can simply find the combination out in the wild. It's not always an either-or type of decision, but there's a level of surprise to how these things can and will be able to be engaged by the player that makes them feel unpredictable, interesting, and rewarding of a player's choices without totally locking them out of progression if they haven't spec'd into X skill. But while the look and the feel of the dialogue trees and the quest design feels very much like streamlined Fallout yet again, Robocop's wise to invoke the world feel and design of one of the best games ever made in Deus Ex. The electronic music, as you slowly walk through the city and engage in side quests with criminals, innocent civilians, and cops alike, is straight out of J.C. Denton's playbook.
Mr. J.C. Denton, in the flesh.
Or maybe even more accurately, the vibes of Deus Ex Human Revolution. The vibe is hard to just describe, you've got to feel it. The linear shootouts are fun too, no doubt, but it's hard to overstate just how cool it feels to not be on rails like Rambo the video game, but to take in the city sights and all the gorgeous environmental detail at your own leisure. The look and feel of combat in the world isn't all that Teyon knocked out of the park. Peter Weller returns as Robocop, and per the director's own words, he was right back into the character as soon as he started recording his lines.
We are here to enforce the law, Lewis. Let us stay focused.
Right.
And because Robo has a much more diverse set of side quests that range from dark and seedy to goofy and outrageous, Weller has a lot more space to be playful and wry than he did in the extremely serious Robocop and Robocop 2. It's really nice to see most of his lines pitched up a bit with an unseen wink at the camera.
You are under arrest. Come quietly, or this may be the last economics discussion you will ever have.
Rogue City's not afraid to be serious. Rogue City's not afraid to be silly, and sometimes it's downright funny, an aspect that the movies sometimes fail at, instead just opting to be weird and kind of stupid, like the kid boss in 2. I want more scenes, like when Robo gets reprogrammed and starts letting criminals off the hook with platitudes while almost murdering people by accident for minor infractions like smoking in public places.
I'm having trouble.
We get a little bit more of that playfulness here in the game, like how I can go from a violent fight with the Torchheads 1 minute to a nice emotional moment with our criminal informant Pickles. He takes us to the wife of the cop that Pickles informs for, and we end up finding his son out past curfew, and the loser Pickles imparts worldly wisdom to the kid.
So he'll let you off with a warning, right?
Right.
There are also some silly side quests where you man the front desk at the police station and run into a criminal trying to collect the reward for turning himself in, or where you have to get signatures for a get well card for Ann Lewis after she gets hospitalized. It's this kind of tonal elasticity that really gives the game heart and likability. But most importantly, Teyon has done what the Robocop movie franchise did less and less of as time went by. Focus on Alex Murphy the man and not just Robocop the street superhero.
I'm a police officer who was killed in the line of duty. I was given a second chance and resurrected inside this metal shell.
Rogue City's not afraid to be self-reflective and explicit about what's going on in Robocop's head, verbalizing and analyzing Murphy's thoughts about himself that you can imagine he's always thinking, but are rarely acknowledged outside of a quick scene or two in the original, where he visits his old home, or in the second movie where he watches his wife from afar. In fact, there are outright creative flashback scenes that start happening after Robo is injured in the opening scene and starts to go on the fritz. These episodes call his effectiveness into question, but at the same time, they give him a convenient, erratic access to his human side, like his rather frightening episode in an abandoned mall where the mannequins are shifting around like they're possessed, and you end up facing this hallucination of Murphy with a gun to your head. Robo even talks with an OCP psychologist named Dr. Blanche, who talks us through our feelings and gives us the impetus we need to embrace our humanity as Alex Murphy, or, if we want to, simply give in to the characterization that OCP has for us as a machine. We could also choose to take a young cop named Ulysses Washington under our wing, attempt to help Pickles the informant reform his life, and we could choose whether to align ourselves with the public trust by giving info or not to an investigative reporter, or siding with one of the two mayoral candidates, Mayor Cusack, who has the interest of the people at heart but will do unscrupulous things to get there and doesn't really give a shit about Robo, or his opponent, a slimy OCP plant who's up to no good but who wants to work with Robo and reinstate him as a human. All these choices affect the ending, and they give Robo an agency that he doesn't really have in the films.
What is it that you expect?
These scenes are straight up the best scenes I've seen in the Robocop franchise, dealing with who he is and what he wants to be. You know, one of the problems with Robocop 2014 is that it spends so much time just weeping and putting on performative angst about what it means to lose your family and your humanity. But there's no real specificity or profundity to any of the proceedings. It's just people crying a lot and then going, this sucks. The hook is the whole idea. In Rogue City, we get a lot more specificity into what Murphy thinks about himself, how he rationalizes the situation, and also what he's going to do about it, you know, now that his life is forever changed.
How did you do that?
I had help.
Oh, that little thing?
It served as a reminder of who I am, who I have always been.
A great police officer?
Among other things.
Resistance is a really good encapsulation of what Terminator is, but Rogue City is additive and transformative in a way that is special. It's also just kind of badass. I kept telling myself that one of the reasons why this Robocop feels better than the ones that have come before is that I really feel like I'm part of something epic, like watching a Christopher Nolan Batman movie. Sure, over-the-top villains and street crime have been a staple of Robocop, not simply Batman, but it's much less goofy here and much more like we're putting down some vile creatures Batman style. There are also some amazing set pieces that revisit places like the steel mill in the movies where we have an epic sniper showdown, or various bank robberies and hostage situations or burning buildings to rescue folks from. The scene where OCP's robots get taken over by the bad guys and sicked on the city amidst an already existing rival gang war was an awesome thing to get in the middle of and put down. There's also a super fucked up subplot about how a project called Afterlife is trying to resurrect the dead and using their brains inside of robots, much like was done in Robocop 2 with Kane. And it's just as disturbing and explosive of an outcome here as it was there. Let's just say finding the bodies of the deceased brain subjects inside freezers was chilling. No pun intended.
I knew you'd say something like that.
So yeah, that's Rogue City, the best damn Robocop experience to date in my humblest of opinions. Teyon really improved nearly everything from Terminator Resistance, so much so that Rambo feels like a half-forgotten dream more than a once-living nightmare. Teyon lets us live out the best parts of the movies while also adding some interesting context to the lore, something that they did well in Resistance, but with a lot more specificity and much more of which the players can do themselves and feel like the star. Robo is perfectly captured here, from Weller's excellent performance to the clank and whoosh of his mechanical footsteps, and the actions visceral and relentless. The action RPG stuff is actually really meaningful to how well you supplement all the nifty guns that Robo can pick up, and it makes it so much more than just a bog standard shooter. This is just a fantastically fun little game that bursts with a love of the material and an eye for detail.
Good job.
Rogue City became Teyon's highest performing action game by far, but it took them 2 years to come out with any additional content for it, primarily because it actually ballooned into much more than just a couple levels like they had done with the Baker team, Rambo DLC, or even Annihilation line for Terminator. In unfinished business, we have a full-fledged location of the Omni Tower to play through, a seedy, nasty monument to OCP decadence that's occupied by roving mercenaries preying on the weak and infirmed who are just trying to make a living there. It's essentially the circles of hell in Milton's Paradise Lost, and it's hardly a realistic place to exist, but it is an affecting sort of allegory, if a bit overly long. You can tell this is an idea that did not need to be drawn out quite this long, despite how good the new additions are.
Trouble, then.
Speaking of new, the tone is surprisingly less chipper than the main game was. The game's opening is dark, police station having been ravaged, and dead bodies are covered in ice lying everywhere. Someone stole our weird data chair, and it seems like they're going to use it to hijack all of OCP's devices. Robo's immediately pissed and really doesn't joke about anything like he did before. He's also kind of rude and short with everyone he encounters for no apparent reason, instead of being kind of neutral like he was in the main game.
Trouble, then.
It's a little strange that he went, full angry Batman on us. It's not that the death of officers wouldn't or shouldn't affect him, but it's never spoken or insinuated to be weighing on him, which is a weird choice. The story centers around a new villain named Cassius Graves, an ex-cop that Murphy used to run with who went rogue and has started taking extreme vigilante measures to counteract crime in old Detroit, spouting self-aggrandizing philosophy as he does so. There's a lot of potential here for Graves to be a great character, but we follow this dude up the tower for at least 6 to 8 hours to get essentially a cutscene of engagement with him, and then it's over. No real resolution other than his defeat. No thematic catharsis. No examination of whether Graves is onto something with his philosophy, or any damning indictment of why that doesn't work. And it really soured the whole experience for me, which is too bad because the gameplay is still as good or better than it ever was, with some sweet new weapons. The graphics are a bit better than they were back in 2023, which is understandable, and some animations like the exploding canisters whip around with much faster frame rate and zip than they did before. Aiming is smoother, and Robo can finally run faster now instead of just barely accelerating past a walk. You can also ricochet shots like Robo could do in the movies, or take enemies down sleeping dog style while near certain environmental objects. They will often see very glitchy animations while doing so. There's also a ton of slowdown while going in between combat zones and in the final couple cutscenes. Unfinished business is also a lot harder than the main game, and it's mostly the better for it. Firefights are tense and much more multi-level than before, and are often against armored mercs instead of just flesh pillow gang members. You'll also get to fight some flying drones and motion-activated explosive guys who are both straight out of Terminator Resistance, as well as some jetpack mercs, who are fun to try and get a beat on and blow them out of the sky. The new weapons aren't too shabby either, though none of them save one are all that good. The minigun's pretty inaccurate and takes a while to spin up, and it doesn't get any better if you use slow-mo. The new machine gun's alright, but it's pretty inaccurate as well. The new ice gun though? You'll feel like Mr. Freeze, and then some, as you charge it up and blow through anything in its path, freezing whole hallways at once. It's incredibly empowering, and so much so that you'll need to be careful you don't blow yourself up. As drawn out as the combat can be, this thing is worth the price of admission and kept me pushing on to the next encounter. There's really not any depth added to our own backstory here, despite being present in these flashbacks. And this thing has one of the most anticlimactic endings to anything I've ever played. Could have easily shaved off a good 2 to 3 hours and probably ended better with time spent more in the more important story areas. It's not bad, and there's certainly a lot of fun to be had here. It's more Robocop, but it's a little surprising that Teyon kind of went for the bloat approach over actually knocking it out of the park yet again. And I was speaking to my buddy Mr. Skotsky from the Primordial Chronicles, and he had a similar outlook, but a slightly rosier assessment of how unfinished business went down. So let's hear from him on what his experience was. Take it away, Skotsky.
So did you know that Polish people make some really good video games? Like so surprisingly good that you're more likely to know what a witcher is rather than this gluten-riddled freak of culinary nature. Rogue City turned out to be something that I forgot how much I truly needed. A brutal, AA, old-school single-player shooter that wasn't afraid to cross the genre line and reach for admittedly quite simplified versions of mechanics from games like Deus Ex Human Revolution, Batman Arkham series, or even bits of the structure of the ever underappreciated Escape from the Butcher Bay. It wasn't all that surprising to learn that its standalone expansion that I've been making my way through these last few weeks, Robocop Rogue City Unfinished Business, Jesus Christ, that's a fucking mouthful, is even closer to being a perfect showing of why we need more of these sorts of AA experiences out there. This game takes all of the elements from the base game that I enjoyed so much, like the feeling of embodying this absolute hulking metal tank of a man, ripping through mercs, bandits, and drones with weapons that satisfyingly crush them to bits, the destructibility of each of the combat arenas, bringing sways of nostalgia for the Fear series, movies, or even the very dry and very Polish sense of humor that a lot of this game sports, and then it compresses all of these elements into a more concise and yet much better paced experience. Unfinished Business blasts through set piece after set piece after set piece, interspersing them with some occasional roleplay as a robot police detective for some NPC quest givers out there, but spacing it all out in a way that doesn't kill the pace of the game, and generally keeps these quests as simple as possible. The flashback gameplay sequences are a welcome addition too, however they last mere minutes and hardly bring much to the table except for making the main antagonist of the game look like a fucking dork that has hardly any idea of what he even actually wants, and so he ends up feeling like he was written up as an afterthought contingency and not an actual bad guy. But sure, the plot is not what I came looking for in this experience. It was mostly the cryo gun, let's be honest. It's like 99% of why you should play this thing. I'm not even joking. Holy shit! But in all seriousness, what I came here for were the simple yet satisfying old school shootouts with hordes of enemies, and that's what I got. Doesn't this kinda look like that place from The Raid or something? Oh, hello there. So to sum up, for the price of admission of 30 American dollaridos, you get like 12 to 14 hours of quite excellent single-player FPS carnage that's messy in a lot of aspects, but still undeniably fun to get through. I'm quite happy to see Teyon go from a meme-tier Rambo game dev team to a proper studio delivering something this simply fucking entertaining. Oh, and before I forget, thanks for having me, Medium. Szkocki out.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I think I come down on Unfinished Business in about the same position as he does. My disappointment in the DLC is really only there because the main game had set such a high precedent. Building on the strengths of Terminator Resistance, Rogue City proved that they could carve out this really cool AA space for themselves that no one's even coming close to in the action game space.
It has always been me.
It's kind of shocking to think that the Rambo video game was made by these guys, considering how it too is a small budget adaptation of a classic 80s action franchise, just with a totally different outcome. It's the details that are so different. Whereas Rambo was a project wrapped around the Heavy Fire series rail shooter gameplay and given nothing but boilerplate attention to production value or additive story to the franchise, Terminator Resistance mimicked other great titles like Fallout, Metro, and Far Cry to effect compelling progression through a stark and dangerous world that felt exciting and made us feel heroic, and gave us never-before-seen insight into how it would feel to see Skynet first start using time travel and human-passing cyborgs. And then, all of this would balloon even further in Rogue City, as Teyon put us squarely in Robocop's metallic boots and made us feel like the guy in ways that no other game has been close to doing. The story's quite good, and the humor, humanity, and playfulness of the game's side missions are endearing and give this game so much more value as a character study of Alex Murphy, the man, than any other Robocop property that I've seen to date, making this an essential part of any Robocop fan's collection. And I don't think there's a better compliment to give a licensed product than that.
A court of law will be the judge of that.
Robocop Rogue City wasn't just as good as Terminator Resistance, it was even better, proving that Teyon's really turned a corner. And I was talking about this very phenomenon the other day with a great friend of the channel named Predator1981, who, as you can imagine, really loves 80s action movies and, in turn, really likes Teyon's 80s action hero games. And he had this to say about the rise of Teyon.
Teyon is, in my opinion, one of the best studios out there when it comes to development growth. Their gain in skill is outright magnificent if you are going to compare their fan service deliverance in their productions. Not only they revived the 80s and 90s most iconic characters and franchises, they also deliver a noticeable improvement in their technical presentation. Rambo started as a fun but not so overwhelming trash game. Terminator was worlds better than their first project, but still lacked to be perfect. And Robocop finally made it to close perfection. This is their best game and the best Robocop game alike. With all their effort, they managed to deliver one of the best fan service out there in the gaming sector. They totally understand the essence of these franchises. If they proceed with the same skill increase on their next project, we can be sure to get something phenomenal. Fingers crossed they will give us a modern Predator game someday.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's been so great to see Teyon go from a laughingstock to a legitimate player in the AA space, a space that I think is a true home of the gamer's gamer these days. Having the budget to make some really cool stuff that the indies can't, but not enough extra resources to afford building out boring extra systems just to elongate the game, like most AAA games tend to.
There are people who would do anything to be in your position, to have your abilities, and yet you attach yourself to something that is the weakest in you.
What do you say, John? Fuck him.
I'm really excited to see what Teyon tackles next, and I really hope they can keep this streak alive. To the next project. Thanks to Teyon for the great games, and for renewing my faith in the process. And thank you for watching the rise of Teyon, from Rambo to Robocop.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Bitches leave.
Patience, Lois. We're only human.
So, if you're enjoying the channel and really want to help it get to the next level, please consider becoming a patron or a channel member. By doing so, you'll be shouted out in the credits of every video, get early access to new videos, receive game keys as available, and even be able to vote on or contribute to upcoming projects. Sounds pretty good, right? Well, these people thought so, and I have to thank them for their generous support. Starting with Mark Neubauer, Deadforge, Hey Blondie, Yaksho, M, Bibby F. and Bloxburg, Melancholy Geek, Sun, and Luke Dudney. Thanks for signing on. I really appreciate it. And an extra special shout out to James Wyatt and the Nth Review for contributing to my highest tiers. And if you're not tired of me by now, go ahead and check me out on the Quad Damage podcast, where I'm joined by Deadforge and Robert Yap as we talk first-person games with developers, gaming personalities, and content creators alike. God bless you, everyone, and I'll see you soon.